Welcome back to the Bible Odyssey. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, come with me to the back of the wilderness. Not the edge of it, the very back. The furthest, quietest place where no one expects anything important to ever happen again. It's the place a person finds themselves when the grand story they once believed in has quietly slipped away. The long, ordinary middle. The slow season of days that feel forgotten. Moses was 80 years old. 80. He had once been a prince in Pharaoh's palace, carrying a burning sense of destiny to deliver God's people. But one rash moment changed everything. He ran. He hid. He became a shepherd in a foreign land, tending someone else's sheep for 40 quiet, unremarkable years. 40 years of watching the same hills, the same sheep, the same empty sky. The calling that once felt so certain now seemed like nothing more than a young man's dream. And yet, on one perfectly ordinary morning, while Moses was doing the same thing he had done for decades, something extraordinary happened. At the back of the wilderness, a bush caught fire, and it kept burning, without burning up. Moses turned aside. A voice spoke his name with tenderness. Moses, Moses. And in that moment, everything changed. Tonight, we remember that the story is never finished when we think it is. Sometimes the greatest chapters begin in the quietest places, on ordinary mornings, to ordinary people who had long stopped expecting anything beautiful. This is the story of the God who finds us at the back of the wilderness and speaks. Exodus chapter 3 verses 1 through 14. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. Moses had not always been a shepherd. He had grown up in Pharaoh's household. The daughter of Pharaoh had drawn him from the Nile when he was an infant. The basket in the reeds, the watching sister, the compassionate daughter of the most powerful man in the world. He was raised in the palace, educated in all the wisdom of Egypt, the mathematics, the architecture, the theology, the art of governance, the languages of the ancient world. He moved in the spaces of power with the ease of someone who had always moved in them. He was a man of considerable gifts in a position that allowed the gifts full expression. And somewhere in the growing up, he knew what he was for. This is the detail that the later chapters of Exodus confirm. Stephen in Acts says it plainly. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them. He felt the calling in his bones. He felt it in the specific, certain way that people feel the thing they were made for, not as a vague spiritual nudge, but as the deep knowing of a person who has found the shape of their life and who recognizes it. He was the deliverer. This was his work. He was certain. And then he watched an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and he killed the Egyptian. And the next day, 2 Hebrews were fighting, and Moses tried to intervene, and the man said, "Are you going to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian?" And Moses knew the word had spread, and Pharaoh tried to kill him, and Moses ran. He ran to Midian. He sat down by a well. He helped some women water their flocks. He married one of them, Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian. He became a shepherd. He named his first son Gershom, a stranger there, because he was a stranger in a foreign land. The prince of Egypt was tending sheep in the desert. The deliverer was at the back of the wilderness, and the years began to pass. 40 years. Let that settle for a moment before we move past it. 40 years is not a sabbatical. It is not a season of intentional preparation, the kind of thing you sign up for because you know it is forming you for something. 40 years in Midian was the slow, ordinary, completely unremarkable experience of a man who had been something and who had become something else. A man who had been a prince and who was now a shepherd. A man who had felt the calling in his bones and who had, across 40 years of the desert, stopped feeling it the way he once felt it. The calling does not shout in Midian. It whispers, or it does not speak at all. Moses was 80 years old when the bush burned. He had been in Midian for 40 years. He had been in Egypt for 40 years before that. The first 40 years were the formation of the person who would become the deliverer, the palace education, the language of the court, the knowledge of Egypt's geography and administration and power. And the second 40 years were the formation of the skills the deliverer would need, the navigation of the desert terrain, the finding of water in the arid land, the leading of a flock through the wilderness routes that would later need to guide 2 million people. The seminary was the desert. The curriculum was the sheep. Moses did not know this. This is the essential thing about the Midian years. Moses could not see from the inside of them what they were for. He could not look at the daily work of the shepherd and understand it as the preparation for the Exodus, the map of the Sinai terrain that was being written into his memory by 40 years of walking it. Moses could not see that the map was being written. He was just walking. He was just shepherding. He was just getting through the ordinary days of a life that had become very far from where it was supposed to go. He led the flock to the far side of the wilderness. the furthest point from where anything significant was expected. And that is where the bush burned, not in the palace, not in the moment of the calling's confirmation, not when Moses was young and certain and ready, at the back of the wilderness, on an ordinary day, when he was 80 years old, when the certainty was gone and the calling was a memory of something that had once felt true. The God who burns the bush comes to the back of the wilderness. He always has. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. Two things happening at once. The fire was real, not a vision, not a mystical experience that hovered at the edge of the observable. The bush was physically burning. The flames were visible in the daylight of the Sinai desert. The fire was doing what fire does. But the bush was not consumed. The branches were not charring. The leaves were not crisping into ash. The fire and the not burning up were both completely real and completely impossible by any natural explanation available. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. I want to stay with this sentence for a moment. Moses did not immediately understand what he was seeing. He had a shepherd's experience of fire. He knew what burning looked like. He knew what destruction looked like. He knew that fire consumed what it touched. And this fire was not consuming. The strangeness registered, and he turned aside to look more closely. The turning aside is the beginning of the encounter. If Moses had looked at the burning bush and continued walking, had assessed it as a curiosity not worth interrupting the work for, had decided the flock needed tending more than the strange sight needed investigating, the encounter would not have happened. Not because God was unable to call him another way, because the encounter at the burning bush was the kind of encounter that requires the person to turn aside, to notice, to choose the investigation of the strange over the continuation of the ordinary. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. The seeing triggered the calling. God waited for Moses to turn aside, and when Moses turned aside, God spoke. The calling came to the person who was paying attention to the not ordinary thing in the ordinary day. The voice came when the turning happened. Moses, Moses, here I am. The double naming, Moses, Moses, is the pattern of the urgent personal address in the Hebrew scriptures. Abraham, Abraham, when the angel stopped the sacrifice of Isaac. Jacob, Jacob, when God spoke to him on the way to Egypt. Samuel, Samuel, the child in the temple. The doubling is the intimacy, not the general broadcast of the divine word to whoever will hear, the specific, personal, completely individual address of the one who knows the person by name and who is calling that specific person in that specific moment. Moses, Moses, here I am. The 80-year-old shepherd at the back of the wilderness answered, and the ordinary day was never ordinary again. Before the commission, before the go and bring my people out, God said three things. I have seen the misery of my people. I have heard them crying out. I am concerned about their suffering. Three declarations. And they are not tactical. They are not God briefing Moses on the current situation before issuing the operational orders. They are the God who feels speaking from the fire about what the feeling is. The seeing and the hearing and the being concerned are the emotional content of the divine address, the expression of the one who has not been absent from the suffering of Egypt, who has been present to every cry, who carries the weight of what has been done to his people. I have seen. The seeing of God in the Hebrew Scriptures is the seeing that leads to action. When God sees, something changes. When God saw the suffering of Israel in Egypt, the trajectory of the entire Exodus was already in motion. The seeing was not passive observation. It was the engaged, invested, about to respond attention of the one whose seeing is always the beginning of the acting. I have heard them crying out. The cry of the oppressed reaching the ears of God is one of the oldest and most consistent theological claims in the Hebrew Scriptures. The God who hears the cry is the God who is not deaf to the suffering of the world, not indifferent, not managing the situation from a distance. The cry reached him. He heard it, and the hearing was not neutral. I am concerned about their suffering. The Hebrew word, yada, is the word for the deep, relational, completely personal knowing. Not, I am aware of their suffering. I know it, in the way that you know something that is inside you, something you carry, something that affects you. God knows the suffering of his people the way a parent knows the suffering of a child, not from a distance, in the body, as something that changes the day and the night of the one who knows it. And then, so I have come down to rescue them. The seeing and the hearing and the knowing produced the coming down. The God who saw and heard and felt the weight of the suffering did not send a memo. He came down from the burning bush to an 80-year-old shepherd at the back of the Sinai wilderness and said, "So now go, I am sending you." Moses said, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." This is the most important sentence in the Hebrew Scriptures. Not was, not will be, not I was who I was, or I will be who I will be, though both of those are also implied. I am who I am. The continuous, uninterrupted, unqualified present tense of the one who simply exists, who does not move through time the way created things move through time, who does not have a before and an after the way Moses has a before and an after, who is not beginning or ending or becoming, but simply being, always, completely, without interruption. This is the name that Moses carried into Egypt, not the name of a tribal deity who governed a particular territory or a specific domain of human concern. The name of the one who is, who was the ground of existence before existence had a ground, who will be the ground of existence after everything that currently exists has finished existing. The I am. And then the specific, completely personal application. I am has sent me to you. The one who is, whose being is not contingent on anything, who does not depend on the circumstances to continue existing, who is not threatened by Pharaoh or by the 40 years of the wilderness or by the 800-year silence between the promise to Abraham and the burning bush, that one has sent Moses to Egypt. The I am is not worried about Pharaoh. The I am is not uncertain about the outcome. The I am simply is. And the one who simply is can send the 80-year-old shepherd to the most powerful ruler in the ancient world with complete confidence that the outcome is not in doubt, because the outcome is held by the one whose existence is not contingent on the outcome. I am who I am. Speak into that silence tonight. The one who spoke from the burning bush is the one who is present in this room right now. Not was present, is present. The I am is not a historical fact about a deity who was active in the ancient Near East and who has since become a theological concept. The I am is the continuous present tense of the one who is here now in this room, as fully as he was in the bush. The bush is burning, right now, in this room, in the ordinary night of the ordinary person who did not expect the fire to find them. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" The objection is the most honest thing Moses says in the whole encounter. Who am I? He is 80 years old. He has been a shepherd for 40 years. He stutters, or at least he believes he stutters, which amounts to the same thing in the moment of the commission. He left Egypt as a fugitive. He has no standing with Pharaoh. He has no standing with the Israelites, who did not recognize him as their deliverer 40 years ago when he tried to help them, and who have no reason to recognize him now. He is, by every reasonable assessment, precisely the wrong person for the job. Who am I? And God said, I will be with you. Not, you are adequate for this. Not, your gifts are sufficient. Your background is appropriate. Your confidence will grow once you get started. None of the reassurances that a human mentor might offer the underqualified candidate. Simply, I will be with you. The adequacy was never Moses's to supply. The adequacy has always been the I ams. Moses makes 5 objections in the burning bush encounter. Who am I? What is your name? What if they don't believe me? I am not eloquent. Please send someone else. 5 different ways of saying the same thing. I am not the right person for this. And to every objection, the answer is some form of the same response. I will be with you. I will give you the words. I will show you what to do. The commission does not rest on Moses' adequacy. It rests on the presence of the I am. Please send someone else. This is the most tender objection, not the practical concerns about credentials or eloquence or credibility. The simple, honest, completely human request of the person who has been asked to do the thing they most want to do and who is most afraid of failing at it. Please send someone else. The 80-year-old shepherd who had carried the calling for 40 years of the wilderness was, at the moment of its fulfillment, asking to be excused from it, and God did not excuse him, but God went with him, and that was enough. Before we meet the people in the everyday parallel, I want to give you something you can take into tomorrow. The burning bush story is not only a story about Moses, it is a story about the shape of a calling, about the relationship between the long middle seasons of a life and the moments when everything changes. And the psychologists have been studying the shape of that relationship. What they have found maps almost exactly onto what happened at the back of the wilderness. The first concept is the psychology of latent preparation. The research on expertise and mastery, the work of psychologists like Anders Ericsson on what actually produces competence in a domain, consistently finds that the most significant preparation for the important work is often invisible in the moment it is happening. The person who will eventually be the master at the thing they were made for is, during the years of the preparation, doing something that does not look like preparation. It looks like ordinary work. It looks like the back of the wilderness. Moses spent 40 years learning the terrain of Sinai. He did not know he was learning the terrain of Sinai. He was shepherding. He was doing the daily work of the person who tends flocks in the desert. But the terrain was being written into him, the locations of water, the navigable routes, the places where the desert opens and the places where it closes. The knowledge that would guide 2 million people through the wilderness for 40 more years was being accumulated across 40 years of the ordinary work of the ordinary shepherd. The practical application, the season that looks like the back of the wilderness, is the season that is writing something into you. You cannot read it from the inside. Moses could not read it from the inside. The writing happens below the level of the conscious awareness, in the skills being built by the daily work, in the resilience being formed by the daily endurance, in the character being shaped by the daily faithfulness. The Midian years look like nothing from inside them. From outside them, from the view of the burning bush, from the view of the Exodus, they look like exactly what they were, the preparation for everything that was coming. The second concept is the psychology of the who am I question. The research on identity and vocation, the work on what psychologists call the gap between the actual self and the ideal self, shows that the who am I question is the most important question a person can ask at the moment of the calling. Not because the answer is discouraging, because the asking of it is the beginning of the honest self-assessment that genuine calling requires. Moses asked, "Who am I?" and received, "I will be with you." The answer did not resolve the who am I question by inflating Moses' sense of his own adequacy. It resolved it by relocating the adequacy. Not, "You are adequate. I will be with you." The adequacy is not yours to supply. The adequacy is the presence of the one who calls. And the person who understands this, who has asked, "Who am I?" and received, "I will be with you," is freed from the exhausting project of making themselves adequate for the calling. The calling does not require your adequacy. It requires your presence and your yes. The practical application, the who am I feeling, is not disqualification. It is the beginning of the right relationship with the calling. The person who feels adequate for the calling has not yet understood what the calling is. The person who asks, "Who am I?" and receives, "I will be with you," is in exactly the right place. The third concept is the psychology of the turning aside. The research on what psychologists call attentional flexibility, the capacity to notice and respond to the unexpected thing in the ordinary flow of the day, shows that the people who make the discoveries, who have the encounters, who receive the moments that change the trajectory of a life, are disproportionately the people who develop the habit of turning aside, of noticing the strange thing, of pausing the ordinary to investigate the not ordinary. Moses turned aside to see why the bush was not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him. The turning aside was the condition of the calling, not the cause of it. God could have found another way to get Moses' attention. But the turning aside was the moment Moses made himself available for the encounter. And the encounter happened in the turning. The practical application. The burning bush in your life is rarely dramatic. It is the ordinary day containing a not ordinary thing, a thought that does not fit the usual thoughts, a conversation that goes somewhere unexpected, a sentence in a book that lands differently than it should. The question is whether you turn aside to look more closely. The practice of turning aside, of noticing the strange thing and taking it seriously rather than returning to the ordinary, is the practice that keeps the burning bush available. Tonight's 3 applications. The ordinary season is writing something into you. Trust the back of the wilderness. Who am I is the right question. I will be with you is the right answer. Turn aside. The bush is burning more often than you know. Here is what the story of Moses at the burning bush does in a life that receives it and keeps returning to it. It forms the trust in the long middle. The person who is in the Midian season, who is at the back of the wilderness in whatever form the back of the wilderness takes in their specific life, needs, more than almost anything else, to trust that the season is not the cancellation of the story. The temptation of the long middle is the belief that the ordinary days are simply passing without accumulating anything, that the Midian years are the wasted years, the years the locusts are eating, the years that will have to be apologized for rather than celebrated when the accounting is finally done. The burning bush story says, the long middle is the preparation. Moses could not see the preparation from inside it. The person in their own long middle cannot see it from inside it. But the preparation is happening. The terrain is being written into the person. The resilience is being formed. The character is being shaped. The knowledge that will be needed is being accumulated by the daily work of the daily ordinary. And the person who returns to this story regularly, who brings their long middle to the 40 years in Midian and holds the two alongside each other, finds that the trust slowly grows. Not because the season has ended, because the story says the season has a destination, and the destination is the burning bush. The story also forms the relationship with the I will be with you. The who am I question does not go away after the first burning bush encounter. Moses asked it 5 times in one conversation. It comes back. In the wilderness, with 2 million complaining Israelites. In the moments when the Red Sea is in front and Pharaoh's army is behind, and the who am I reasserts itself in the specific, practical, urgent form of what do I do now? And the answer is always some version of the same thing. I will be with you. Watch what I do. The adequacy is not yours to supply. The person who returns to this story across the different seasons builds, across the returning, the trust in the I will be with you that is not yet fully formed in the first encounter. The trust that the adequacy required for the calling is the adequacy of the one who calls. And the one who calls is the I Am, whose existence is not contingent on the circumstances, whose presence does not depend on the favorable outcome, who is with Moses in the wilderness, and with Moses before Pharaoh, and with Moses in the moments when Moses is most certain he cannot do this. The burning bush is still burning. The I Am is still I Am, and the voice is still calling the name of the 80-year-old shepherd at the back of the wilderness, including yours, tonight. And now, let everything grow very still. You are in your own room, your own bed, your own quiet dark, and the story has been told. The bush burned at the back of the wilderness. The voice called the name of the 80-year-old shepherd who had stopped expecting to be called. And what was said from the fire changed everything. Let the long middle be received. Whatever the Midian season is in your life, the years of the ordinary work in the ordinary place, the time between the beginning and the burning bush, the season that looks from the inside like the wasted years, let it be received tonight as the preparation it is. The terrain is being written into you right now, not in spite of the ordinary days, through them. The skills being built, the resilience being formed, the character being shaped. The writing is happening in the daily ordinary in ways you cannot read from the inside. Moses could not read the writing from inside the 40 years. You cannot read the writing from inside yours. But the writing is happening. The bush is coming. The ordinary season is the seminary. And you are further along than you know. Let the name be received. Moses, Moses, the double naming, the specific, personal, completely individual address of the one who knows you by name and who is calling your name right now. Not a general invitation to whoever will respond. Your name, the name that is yours and nobody else's. The one who spoke from the burning bush knows how to find the person at the back of the wilderness. He found Moses when Moses was 80 and far away and had stopped expecting to be found. He finds you tonight, in this room, in this dark. Your name, "Here I am," is enough. That is all the burning bush required of Moses. It is all that is required of you. Let the "I will be with you" be enough. Whatever the calling is, the thing you feel in your bones that you were made for, the work you have been asking, "Who am I about?" The answer is not the inflation of your confidence or the resolving of your inadequacy. The answer is, "I will be with you." The adequacy is the I Ams. The one who sent the stuttering 80-year-old shepherd to the most powerful ruler in the ancient world did not require Moses to be adequate. He required Moses to go, and the going was held by the presence that cannot be shaken. I will be with you. That is the ground of the calling. It has always been the ground of the calling. It is the ground tonight, and let the turning aside be practiced. The bush is burning more often than you know. The strange thing in the corner of the ordinary day, the thought that does not fit, the warmth that arrived without announcement, the sentence that landed differently. These are the fire in the branches. The question is whether you turn aside to look more closely. Tonight is the turning aside. This is the moment of pausing the ordinary and taking the strange warmth seriously. Here I am. The bush was waiting for that. And the voice that called from the bush is the voice that is speaking right now, in this room, in this lying down, in the quiet of the person who has turned aside and who is listening. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Exodus 3:2-3, NY5. God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Exodus 3:4, NY5. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Exodus 3:14, NY5. And God said, I will be with you. Exodus 3:12, NIV. Sleep now. The bush is burning, and the I am is in this room, the one who spoke from the fire.